Enlil was a very important god in ancient Mesopotamia. The people who lived there long ago believed in many gods and goddesses, and Enlil was one of the most powerful of them all. His name has a simple meaning in the Sumerian language. En means Lord, and Lil means wind or air. So his name, Enlil, means Lord of the Wind. This name really tells us a lot about his main powers. He was a supreme ruler among the gods, often seen as the king of the gods, kind of like how a human king would rule over his people on Earth. The Mesopotamians looked to him as a figure of immense authority and strength. He was part of a very important group of 3 gods, a triad of the most powerful deities in the heavens. The other 2 gods were Anu and Enki. Anu was the god of the sky and was considered the father of all the gods. Enki, also known as Ea, was the god of water, knowledge, and creation. Together, these 3 gods controlled the entire universe as the Mesopotamians understood it. Enlil's specific domain was the earth and the air that surrounded it. He was the force that existed between the sky above, which was Anu's realm, and the waters below, which belonged to Enki. This made him very close to the world of humans. The stories about Enlil show him as a complex god. He was not just a simple force of nature, he was a creator, a lawgiver, and sometimes a very harsh judge. He was believed to be the one who gave kings their power to rule. A human king needed Enlil's blessing to be seen as legitimate by his people, which made Enlil a very political god as well as a natural one. His decisions could change the fate of entire cities and civilizations. He was responsible for making the land fertile and for causing destructive storms. This dual nature made him both loved and deeply feared by the people who worshipped him. Understanding Enlil is key to understanding the beliefs of ancient Mesopotamia. He was at the center of their religious world for thousands of years. From the early Sumerians to the later Babylonians and Assyrians, Enlil's importance remained. The myths and hymns dedicated to him paint a picture of a mighty deity whose breath could bring life or destruction. He was the guardian of the Tablets of Destiny, which gave him control over the fate of everything in existence. His story is really the story of how ancient people tried to make sense of the powerful and often unpredictable forces of nature that shaped their daily lives. Enlil's primary role was as the god of the wind, air, and storms. These were not just simple weather phenomena to the ancient Mesopotamians. They were powerful, life-altering forces. The wind could be a gentle breeze that cooled the hot summer days, making life more comfortable. But it could also be a violent dust storm that swept across the plains, blocking out the sun, and making it impossible to travel or work in the fields. Enlil was the master of all these forms of air and wind. His breath was the wind itself, and his mood could determine whether the wind was helpful or harmful to humanity. He was the very atmosphere that people breathed. The storms that Enlil commanded were a source of great fear and awe. Mesopotamia was a land of rivers, but rainfall was often scarce and unpredictable. A good, strong rainstorm could be a blessing, bringing much-needed water to the crops and ensuring a plentiful harvest. However, a violent thunderstorm with powerful winds and flooding could be utterly devastating. It could destroy homes, flatten fields of barley, and drown livestock. The people believed that these destructive storms were a sign of Enlil's anger. They saw his power in the flash of lightning and heard his voice in the roar of the thunder. He was the embodiment of nature's unpredictable and sometimes wrathful power. Beyond just the weather, Enlil's control over the air was deeply symbolic. Air is essential for all life. Without it, nothing can breathe or survive. In this way, Enlil was seen as a source of life itself. He was the one who separated the sky from the earth at the beginning of time, creating the space for life to exist. This space, the atmosphere, was his kingdom. His power was invisible, but always present, just like the air. This made him a fundamental part of the cosmic order. He maintained the world where humans lived, and his continued presence ensured that the world continued to function as it should. This connection to the air also made Enlil the master of the word, or command. In Mesopotamian thought, a spoken command was like a puff of breath that carried power. When Enlil spoke, his commands became reality. His divine word was an unstoppable force that shaped the destiny of gods and mortals alike. He gave orders that other gods had to follow. He decided which cities would prosper and which would fall. This power of the divine word was directly linked to his nature as the Lord of the Air, the medium through which sound and speech travel. His commands were carried on the wind, reaching every corner of the world. The most important city for the worship of Enlil was Nippur. This ancient city was located in what is now modern-day Iraq. For thousands of years, Nippur was not a political capital like Babylon or Ur. It did not have a powerful king who ruled over a large empire. Instead, its importance was purely religious. It was considered the sacred home of Enlil on earth. People from all over Mesopotamia, from different cities and kingdoms, saw Nippur as the spiritual center of their world. They believed that Enlil himself resided there, in his magnificent temple. This made the city a place of pilgrimage and great reverence. The main temple in Nippur was called the Ekur. This Sumerian name means mountain house. This name was very significant. The Mesopotamians believed that mountains were special places where the earthly world could connect with the divine world of the heavens. The Ekur was designed to be an artificial mountain, a ziggurat reaching towards the sky. It was here that the most important rituals for Enlil were performed. The priests of the Ekur were very powerful and respected figures. They were seen as the direct servants of Enlil, responsible for communicating with him and appeasing him on behalf of all people. The temple was a place of immense wealth, receiving offerings from kings and commoners alike. Because Nippur was Enlil's city, it held a unique status. A king from any Mesopotamian city, whether it was Lagash, Ur, or Babylon, needed to be recognized by Enlil to be considered a true ruler. To gain this recognition, kings would send lavish gifts to the Ekur temple. They would fund repairs and new constructions for the temple to show their devotion. By honoring Enlil and his sacred city, a king could claim that he had the divine right to rule. Scribes in Nippur would then write inscriptions declaring that Enlil had chosen this king and given him the scepter of power. This made Nippur a key player in the politics of the region, despite not having its own army. The city of Nippur and its temple, the Ekur, were seen as the bond that held the land of Sumer together. It was the Duran Key, the bond of heaven and earth. This was the place where the will of the gods was made known to humanity. Important decisions about the fate of the nation were believed to be made by Enlil within his temple walls. If a great flood was coming, or if a bountiful harvest was expected, the priests of Nippur would be the ones to interpret the signs. For this reason, the well-being of Nippur was considered essential for the stability of the entire civilization. Its preservation was a priority for every powerful ruler. Enlil was part of a divine family that included many other important gods and goddesses. His father was Anu, the god of the highest heavens. Anu was the original ruler of the universe, a distant and majestic figure who represented the sky itself. Enlil's mother was often identified as the goddess Kai, who personified the earth. The story of their separation by Enlil is a fundamental creation myth. Enlil's brother was Enki, also called Ea, the clever god of the freshwater ocean beneath the earth, as well as wisdom and magic. While Enlil represented authority and force, Enki was often portrayed as a cunning and creative deity who sometimes acted as a protector of humanity against Enlil's harsh decrees. Enlil's wife was the goddess Ninlil. She was also a powerful deity, often called the Lady of the Wind. Their story is told in a famous myth that explains the birth of their children. Ninlil was a grain goddess, and her union with Enlil was essential for the fertility of the land. They had several important children who became major gods in their own right. One of their most famous sons was Nana, the moon god, who was known as Sin by the Akkadians. Nana was a very popular god, worshipped especially in the great city of Ur. He brought light to the darkness of the night and was responsible for measuring time. Other children of Enlil and Ninlil included Ninurta and Nergal. Ninurta was a mighty warrior god and also a god of farming. He was a heroic figure who battled monsters and chaotic forces to bring order to the world. He was the champion of the gods, often carrying out Enlil's will by force. He protected farmers and helped them with the plow and irrigation. Nergal was a more fearsome god. He was the ruler of the underworld, the land of the dead. He was associated with plague, war, and the scorching heat of the midday sun. His role was to oversee the kingdom of the dead and ensure that no one escaped. This divine family shows how the Mesopotamians organized their understanding of the world. Each god had a specific role and domain, much like members of a human family might have different responsibilities. Enlil, as the head of this earthly family, held the ultimate authority. His relationships with his wife, brother, and children were the subject of many myths. These stories were not just entertainment. They explained the workings of the universe. They showed how the moon, the underworld, and the forces of war and agriculture were all connected to the great Lord of the Wind, Enlil. His family tree was a map of the cosmos. Enlil played a central role in the Mesopotamian stories about the creation of the world. In the beginning, according to one important myth, heaven and earth were not separate. They were joined together as one single entity. Anu, the sky, and Ki, the earth, were locked in an eternal embrace. There was no space between them for anything to live or grow. It was Enlil who changed this. He was born from their union, and with his immense power as the Lord of the Wind, he pushed them apart. He lifted his father, Anu, up into the sky, and he established his mother, Kai, as the ground below. This act of separation was the fundamental first step in creating the world as we know it. By splitting heaven and earth, Enlil created the realm where life could begin. This new space, the atmosphere, or Lil, became his domain. It was in this space that he organized the rest of creation. He was seen as the one who established order out of the initial chaos. He made the sun, moon, and stars move in their proper courses across the sky. He was also credited with creating the tools that humans would need to survive. One myth tells how Enlil invented the pickaxe, a very important tool for the Mesopotamians. It was used for digging irrigation canals, building cities, and farming the land. He presented this tool to humanity as a gift. After creating the physical world, Enlil was also responsible for the creation of human society. He was the one who instituted kingship, the system of government that the Mesopotamians lived under. He gave the first kings their power and authority to rule over the people. He established the laws that governed society and ensured that justice was maintained. The divine order that Enlil created in the cosmos was meant to be reflected in the social order on Earth. The king was Enlil's representative, tasked with upholding the divine laws and ensuring the prosperity of the land. His role as a cosmic organizer was mirrored in his role as a social organizer. However, Enlil's role in creation also had a darker side. He was not always a kind and benevolent creator. The myths often portray him as being easily irritated by the noise and clamor of humanity. He was a god who valued peace and quiet, and the growing population of humans on Earth began to disturb his rest. This annoyance would eventually lead to some of his most destructive acts against his own creations. His creative power was matched by an equally immense destructive power. He who gave life could also be the one to take it away, showing the fragile position of humanity in a world governed by such a powerful and temperamental god. One of the most famous stories about Enlil is the Mesopotamian account of the Great Flood. This story is, very similar to the biblical tale of Noah's Ark, and shows Enlil in his most destructive role. In the myth, the human population had grown very large. The people were so numerous and so noisy that their clamor rose up to the heavens and disturbed the gods. Enlil, in particular, could not get any sleep because of the constant noise. He became enraged by this disruption and decided that the only solution was to wipe out humanity completely. He was determined to destroy his own creation to restore peace and quiet for the gods. Enlil convinced the other gods in the divine assembly to agree to his plan. He made them all swear an oath that they would not warn any human about the coming disaster. He planned to send a massive flood that would cover the entire world and drown every living man, woman, and child. However, one god, Enki, felt pity for humanity. Enki was known for his wisdom and his fondness for the people he had helped create. Bound by his oath, he could not speak directly to a human. So, he devised a clever plan. He went to the reed hut of a wise and righteous man named Utnapishtim, in the Babylonian version, and spoke to the wall of the hut, knowing Utnapishtim was listening inside. Enki instructed Utnapishtim to tear down his house and build a giant boat. He gave him the exact dimensions for the vessel and told him to cover it with pitch to make it waterproof. Enki told him to take his family and the seeds of all living things, both wild and domestic animals, onto the boat. Utnapishtim did exactly as he was told. He built the massive ark and loaded it with his family, craftsmen, and animals of every kind. Soon after he sealed the door, the storm began. Enlil unleashed the full fury of the winds and the rains. The flood was so terrible that even the gods themselves were frightened by the destruction they had caused. The storm raged for 6 days and 7 nights, and the entire world was submerged in water. When the flood finally subsided, Utnapishtim's boat came to rest on the peak of a mountain. He sent out a dove, then a swallow, and finally a raven to see if the land was dry. When the raven did not return, he knew it was safe to emerge. He made an offering to the gods, and the sweet smell attracted them. Enlil was furious when he saw the boat, realizing that someone had survived. But Enki confessed his role and argued that punishing all of humanity was too severe. Enlil eventually calmed down, and in the end, he granted Utnapishtim and his wife immortality for preserving life on Earth. Another important myth reveals a different, more personal side of Enlil. This story, known as Enlil and Ninlil, explains the birth of several major gods and also serves to explain some aspects of the natural world. The story begins in the city of Nippur, before it was inhabited by humans. The young goddess Ninlil was warned by her mother not to bathe in the pure canal of the city, as the great god Enlil often walked along its banks. Ninlil, being young and perhaps a little rebellious, ignored her mother's advice. She went to the canal to bathe, and sure enough, Enlil saw her and was immediately captivated by her beauty. Enlil, overcome with desire, forced himself upon Ninlil. This act was a grave crime, even among the gods. When the other great gods in the divine assembly learned what Enlil had done, they were outraged. They declared that Enlil, despite being their king, had broken the sacred laws. As punishment for his terrible deed, they seized him and banished him from the city of the gods, sending him to the underworld, the land of the dead. This part of the story shows that even the most powerful god was subject to the rule of law and the judgment of his peers. It demonstrates the importance of order and justice in the Mesopotamian worldview. However, Ninlil, who was now pregnant with Enlil's child, refused to be separated from him. She was determined to follow him into the dark realm of the underworld. Enlil, knowing she was following him, devised a clever plan. On her journey, Ninlil encountered three figures: the gatekeeper of the underworld, the man of the river of the underworld, and the ferryman of the underworld. Each time, Enlil disguised himself as one of these figures. He would then lie with Ninlil again. From each of these three unions, a new chthonic or underworld deity was conceived. This was his way of ensuring his firstborn son would not have to remain in the underworld. The first child conceived from their initial union in Nippur was the moon god Nana. By creating three substitute children to take his place, Enlil ensured that his beloved son Nana could ascend to the heavens and travel across the night sky. This complex myth serves multiple purposes. It explains the origin of the moon god and several underworld gods. It also acts as a cautionary tale about the abuse of power and demonstrates the consequences of unlawful actions. At the same time, it is a story of loyalty and love, as Ninlil follows Enlil even into the land of the dead, ultimately solidifying their bond as husband and wife. The people of Mesopotamia had a very complex relationship with Enlil. They felt both deep respect and profound fear towards him. The respect came from his role as the sustainer of the world and the source of royal authority. He was the one who made the land fertile, who caused the crops to grow, and who established the order that made civilization possible. Kings proudly called themselves the beloved of Enlil because his favor was the ultimate proof of their right to rule. Without Enlil's blessing, a king's reign was considered illegitimate and doomed to fail. People offered him prayers and built him magnificent temples to show their gratitude and secure his continued goodwill. However, the fear of Enlil was just as powerful, if not more so. He was the god of the storm, and his power was as destructive as it was creative. A sudden flood, a violent windstorm, or a period of drought were all seen as expressions of Enlil's anger. The story of the Great Flood was a constant reminder of how ruthless he could be when angered. The people believed that he could be unpredictable and easily irritated. His divine decrees, which were recorded on the tablets of destiny, were absolute and could not be challenged. The fear of displeasing him was a major force in Mesopotamian society, shaping their rituals and their moral codes. People showed their respect and tried to manage their fear through constant worship and sacrifice. The priests at his temple in Nippur performed daily rituals to keep him happy. They offered food, drink, and incense to the statue of the god, which was believed to contain his divine presence. Festivals were held in his honor throughout the year. During these events, people would sing hymns praising his power and his greatness. These hymns often acknowledged his fearsome nature. They would call him the raging storm or the wild bull, while also praising him as the father of the land. This dual language shows how they tried to appease both sides of his personality. This mixture of fear and respect is what made Enlil such a central figure. He was not a distant, benevolent god, but an active and powerful force in the world whose mood could affect everyone's daily life. He represented the unpredictable nature of the world itself. Life in Mesopotamia could be prosperous one year and devastating the next due to floods or droughts. Enlil personified this reality. People did not necessarily have to love him, but they absolutely had to respect his power. Their survival depended on staying on his good side, and this made him the most worshipped, and perhaps the most feared god in the entire pantheon for a very long time. Enlil's importance in ancient Mesopotamia cannot be overstated. For nearly 3,000 years, he stood at the very center of the religious, political, and cultural life of the civilization. He was more than just a god of the wind. He was the embodiment of divine authority and earthly power. As the king of the gods, his decisions shaped the fate of both deities and humans. His temple in Nippur was the spiritual heart of the land, a place of pilgrimage and a symbol of national unity. Understanding Enlil is essential for understanding how the ancient Mesopotamians viewed their world, their gods, and their own place within the cosmos. His legacy is preserved in the countless myths, hymns, and royal inscriptions that have been discovered by archaeologists. These ancient texts paint a vivid picture of a complex and multifaceted deity. He was the creator who established world order, the lawgiver who founded kingship, and the fearsome storm god who could destroy everything he had made. The story of the Great Flood, in which he plays a leading role, is one of the world's oldest and most influential myths, showing his profound impact on the stories that have shaped human culture. He was a god who represented both the life-giving and the life-taking aspects of nature. The worship of Enlil declined as new empires rose and brought their own gods to prominence. The Babylonian god Marduk, for example, eventually took over many of Enlil's roles and titles. In the Babylonian creation epic, the Enuma Elish, it is Marduk, not Enlil, who becomes the king of the gods. However, even in this new era, Enlil's influence remained. Marduk was often referred to by the title Bel, which means Lord, a title that had long been associated with Enlil. This shows that even when his direct worship faded, the concept of a supreme god of the earth, the Lord Wind, continued to be a powerful idea. In summary, Enlil was the master of the human realm. He was the link between the distant sky and the watery deep, the ruler of the air we breathe and the earth we live on. He gave kings their power, established the laws of society, and controlled the forces of nature that could bring prosperity or ruin. His stories reveal the hopes and fears of the ancient Mesopotamian people. They respected his creative power and feared his destructive wrath. He was the divine king, the powerful storm, and the ultimate judge. The shadow of his sacred mountain house, the Ekur, stretched across the entire history of Mesopotamian civilization, marking him as one of the most significant deities of the ancient world.